You won't need 3D glasses for my talk tonight, but I do love this picture, so I'm showing it to you. And we're in a movie theater. And what I wanted to say, the reason I put it up here is what I wanted to say about architecture and what separates it from the other arts is that it is experienced by many people, not by selection, not by walking into a movie theater, but inevitably as they walk down the street. So thank you so much for the lovely introductions, and it is fun to be in Dallas, and I got to go inside City Hall today, so I am very excited and mission-driven to help save it. My lecture is, it's awesome. I mean, it should not be torn down. My lecture is titled Nows, which I will explain to you in a minute. People used to think that this is what an architect looked like Howard Rourke or Frank Lloyd Wright. Architects presenting themselves to the world as heroes silhouetted against a setting sun. But to my mind, architecture and architects look more like this, and this is who we are at TenBerke. So during this talk, I may use the word I, but we work definitely as a we. And we describe ourselves as an architecture studio driven by a sense of purpose and promise. So Emily Dickinson said, opening a poem with this line, "Forever is composed of nows." And as an architect, I like to think that now is always simultaneously about the past and about the future. So in this talk tonight, I'm going to show you a series of projects of different sizes in different locations and with different programs that each, I'd like to believe, hold the past and the future in them, and they are a kind of forever now, or I hope they are. So the first project I'm going to show you is a house for a family in Indianapolis. It's set quite a ways back from the main street, so even though it's quite close to downtown, you can't see the house from the street, and it's revealed as you head up a long driveway and pass through some trees that shield it from the road. It's very long and low, and the plants come right up to the windows, and it glows from within with the warmth of this wood, which is really a part of its story about past and future. So the owners of this house are proud Hoosiers, and they bought the wood from a neighbor. And that story, together, how we figured out how to use the wood, contributes. So when you think of Indianapolis, you maybe think of the Indy 500, which is part of this story because it owes its existence to Clabber Girl baking powder. I bet you didn't know that. The neighbor's grandfather was a man named Tony Holman. He started the Indianapolis 500 in the early 1900s, and his resources to do that came from Clabber Girl baking powder, which was his family's original business. And the Clabber Girl factory was built in 1900 in Indiana, and it used this wood as its structural beams. The trees started growing in Indiana hundreds of years ago and were cut down for the factory building in about 1895. We got them. They were 24 inches by 24 inches by 16 feet long tar-covered beams, and we milled them into usable material for this house. We had to remove all the screws and bolts, but they felt, somehow you knew in your gut, they felt of this place, as does the Indiana limestone floor. So we used the wood to encase these interior volumes, help define the rooms, separate for the parents from the kids. The tiles in the kitchen are also made in the Midwest and complement the texture of the wood. And you can see in this image, even that little bit of wood, how the wood helps shape every place. There is no room you can be in the house without that wood being part of your experience. And from the lower portion of the meadow in front of the house, this is all flood land, so you can't build down there. You really feel that this is a place of Indy and a place of Indiana. So I'm now going to take you to a project in Oklahoma City where we repurposed a semi-abandoned building that had been a Ford assembly plant and put it to new and unexpected use that brought life back to a part of the city that for years had had empty streets and no activity. It was an Albert Kahn designed building. He's the other great American architect named Kahn. Albert Kahn was an immigrant. His family moved to Detroit from Prussia when he was 12 years old. He did many buildings for Ford, including the half-mile-long River Rouge complex. Maybe some of you have been there. He also did several buildings at the University of Michigan, and 60 Albert Kahn buildings are on the National Register of Historic Places. He was an accomplished guy. And Model Ts were assembled inside this building. The parts were brought kind of flat pack style, pre-IKEA. They would ship the Model Ts flat and then assemble them regionally to be distributed. It made a lot more sense than shipping air, obviously. So you see that happening here. And now you see the renovated building. That's a tree sculpture in front of it, a very popular bar at the corner, and the hotel entrance to the right. Not surprisingly, when we started, the building had a thick, robust structure. It was obviously strong enough to hold the assembly of automobiles, and very deep floor plates front to back, so not at all ideal for hotel room layouts. So what we did was cut light shafts through the very thick floors, a lot of reinforcement in that building, to bring light into the interior spaces. You can see those here in the section through the building. And you can see them here as they were cut, and then what they looked like as finished volumes. What they did inside was bring a kind of glowing natural light to the hallways of the building. Loved the columns in this building, just loved the columns. And this is only about a third of the way down the hallway, so they went magnificently, endlessly. And here you get a sense of the interior guest rooms that faced into those light wells that we had carved through the building. We also celebrated the massive columns in the hallways, where they helped establish a kind of rhythm for the guest room doors. And here in the lobby, where we added, you can see in the background, a round ballroom as a counterpoint to the columns' linear regularity. And we truly celebrated the columns wherever we could find them. As you can see here, we made one the centerpiece of the bar. Now, sometimes buildings have long and fascinating histories that aren't as easy to tell as a Ford assembly plant, and that's definitely true of the Kirkbride hospitals of the late 19th century. One of the most famous Kirkbride buildings is the one in Buffalo, New York, designed by H.H. Richardson, with a landscape by Frederick Law Olmsted. It was built as an asylum for people suffering from what we today would call PTSD in the decades following the Civil War. Construction on this building started in 1871 and was completed in 1895. So anybody who complains about construction delays, this took quite a while to finish. And the building was absolutely, I could do a long riff on Kirkbride hospitals. If there is Q&A later, we'll go into it. Otherwise, we will never get done with this lecture. But anyway, this building was actually beloved by the community. And in fact, one of the parts of the now part of this story is how the community fought for over 20 years to save it from being torn down. Bake sales, car washes, scary Halloween tours, anything to keep this building intact. The original building was close to half a mile long. You can see it here outlined in red. On the right-hand side, you can see where 3 of its wings were torn down in the 1960s to make way for a new psychiatric hospital run by the state of New York. And we were asked to renovate the center of it, the part in solid red in this drawing, and turn it into a hotel and conference center. You can see from this site plan all the small buildings. At the bottom is a residential neighborhood. At the top is the University of Buffalo campus. So there was a need actually for a conference center and a hotel. It looked like this when we started our work, including this ghastly addition from the 1940s in the center. The red sandstone of the building was stunning, but it had not been maintained or repointed or really anything in more than 100 years. The building is load-bearing masonry, so the walls were more than 3.5 feet thick at the lower floors. It was something. The insides looked like this. It was derelict. It hadn't been used for about 20 years. But you can also see in this some of the beautiful details of the original construction, including the very wide south-facing hallway. Those were used as part of the treatment. They would take the patients out of their rooms and they'd sit in the hall in the sun as part of the cure of their insanity, is the term that was used then. And these very small openings were doors to the very tiny patient individual rooms, which look like this. Clearly not big enough to be used as a contemporary hotel room. And given the thickness of the walls, we could only do limited demolition, and that had to be done very carefully. We were told, turn the hallways into the rooms and turn the rooms into the hallways. And I said, no, we won't do that. That destroys the entire idea of this building. The landscape was also restored to much of what Olmsted had designed. It's only starting to grow in here. And what you can see in this photograph is the very, very light touch of our addition. There were a lot of arm wrestling with the historic preservation people. It's 6 inches back from, so we were paying deference and homage to H.H. Richardson, and you can see it in the center of the plan in this drawing. This is what you see as you approach. The landscape hadn't quite grown in when this photo was taken. Within it is the new lobby. And it's a stair that brings one to the second floor, which is actually the main floor of the building, and where the lobby is on the ground floor is an architectural museum, small architectural museum. So we added color throughout this building to complement and celebrate the original volumes and spaces, and restored details wherever we could. We never ever imitated them or copied them, and you can see the quality of the detailing here, the old stairs, the ceiling. And here in that curved connector, you might remember from the earlier image of the outside, between the main building and one of the wings, these glorious, and they're really beautiful tile floors, were in pretty amazingly good condition after 150 years. And this is one of those long south-facing hallways which we restored. Now these tiny white volumes were things that we added so that the guest room and bathroom layouts would actually work. There was no way to squeeze everything in, and what you can see here in this plan is that little white bump makes this, which was once 3 rooms, and that was a room, into guest room layouts that actually could function. Here's one of the corner guest rooms. You can see I always find columns that have paint falling off of them, and I decide to save them. It's a cheap trick. One of the things we were able to do was create a new balcony on the top of our addition. It's accessible from an upper level bar on the inside, and it has beautiful views out over the restored landscape. And I am very proud to say that this project won the top design prize from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Now I'm going to change locations and centuries. This is a very small house in New Canaan, Connecticut. It is brand new, but we were well aware of the history of the place, not just its New Englandness, but its more recent architectural heritage, the Harvard Five, Philip Johnson, John Johansson, Landis Gores, Elliot Noyes, and Marcel Breuer, architects who were all fueled by a sense of optimism in the wake of World War II, and they all built buildings in New Canaan. The locals didn't like their buildings. They called them Kleenex box houses, but they were celebrated in the world of architecture, and these folks and their followers and imitators and disciples found New Canaan's wooded rolling hills to be the perfect sort of background canvas for experimentation with Bauhaus ideas. So we built on that history and looked to that history for our inspiration, I guess another version of making that past part of the now. So upon arrival at this little guest house, you don't quite know what to expect. You walk along a brick wall under the outline of a trellis to the front door. And what is revealed to you when you enter is an extraordinary view of a delicate, graceful, small pond set in the woods, I think completely New England in its character. The main room is living, dining, and kitchen. The paneling is flat sawn walnut. The property was covered with walnut trees. We didn't actually cut them down to use them, but there is, again, this idea of resonance between what belongs in a place. And the house is essentially designed solely around the view of the pond. You can see the bedroom in this image as well, and a little courtyard with a tree in it. The house is really used for entertaining, and the bedroom, bathroom, and pool all share a view of this little courtyard with a tree in it. You see it here from the bathroom, and here from the other side. Now, when I started this talk, I said it was about now and about how that's a combination of the past and the future. And this might be a funny version of this, because the past is the new Canaan 5, the New England landscape further past, and the future, I think, is, of course, this house is highly sustainable, high performance, and we'd like to think totally anchored to its site. So I'm going to take you to Eastern Long Island now, to Montauk Point, which was the summer retreat of the New York-based playwright Edward Albee, who died in 2016 at the age of 88. You're all probably familiar with his name. One of the country's great playwrights, known for The Zoo Story, The Sandbox, Three Tall Women, and of course, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? During his lifetime, he bought this building, a former dairy barn built in the 1920s, and started a small artist residency program. He funded it out of his pocket, so it was done on a very low budget and could only meet in the summertime, because that was the only time the building was remotely habitable, meaning warm enough to work in. And the program was very simple. It was for 2 writers and 2 painters, as that's what the building could hold. So what happened is Albee died, and Sotheby's auctioned off a lot of his art collection, made a lot of money, and a foundation was created, and it had the funds to actually properly endow the residency program as well as repair the building. So this is the ground floor plan of the building, and it's pretty easy to see the 2 artist studios, the 2 writers' studios, and then on the right-hand side, the shared kitchen, laundry room, and stuff that the 4 artists in residence use together. We updated the building so it's accessible. You can see an elevator and a stair. And on the second floor, there is a bedroom and bathroom for each of the 4 artists in residence, and a shared library space. Turned out that the building was in really terrible shape, rotting from the bottom up. So we had to get rid of all the rotten wood. But what we did save were these extraordinary original wood trusses, which were key really to the character of the building and told of its past life. They're of eastern hemlock and fir, we think either from Connecticut or Long Island 100 and something years ago. It now looks like this. And if you are noticing that we changed the dormer, you're right. You can also see in this picture the caretaker's house, which was another building that we restored and updated. We decided that the pointy little dormers in the original didn't matter nearly as much as making usable space on both floors for the artists. That was Albee's mission. So we made one long shed dormer to replace them, which actually then allowed us to show off the trusses, which were perhaps the most important and meaningful experience in the building, as well as create a space like this, which could house Albee's library and furniture. I will say in every project you're looking at, we have done the interiors. In this particular instance, that meant moving Edward Albee's furniture into the building. You see here in the center, just to the right of the stair rail, an entry into one of the 4 bedrooms. Get a sense of what those bedrooms are like. They too have a piece of a truss. And as I mentioned, the residents cook and eat together. This is the kitchen. It literally has cookbooks from Albee's collection, his silver, his china, his glassware. There's a great place to sit outside just beyond that kitchen. But of course, the most important spaces in the building are the ones where the artists work. This is one of the writer's studios, Albee's desk, more of his books. And this is one of the painting studios, and you can see how the truss comes down from above into the lower floor of the building. And one thing that's happened that we love is that the signatures of some of the artists now appear on the side of the truss. They sign as they're leaving after their residency. When we started the practice, now a very long time ago, our first projects were for artists, re-inhabiting industrial buildings to live and work in, and somehow the imprint on my life of working with artists over so many decades is still with us today and continues to guide many aspects of the practice, especially our interest, I would say, in regenerative and repurposed buildings, adapting old buildings for renewed use. So I'm going to take you back to New England. This is another new house in northwestern Connecticut. On a large property, it frames a long view to the south over open fields that had been used for farming since before the American Revolution. Agriculture actually played a major role in the early growth of Connecticut because unlike its more northern New England neighbors, it had more fertile soil, a more temperate climate, and easier access to the markets of Boston and particularly New York. So the Industrial Revolution changed that in the 19th century, but on this particular property, the fields were farmed and tended until the middle of the 20th century. So you can see that here. Most of it is second and third growth, but you can see the site of our house here and its rather long driveway through the woods. So we decided to embrace the field and build on it, but only at the very, very edge so that the sense of the field would not be destroyed. And as for the responsibilities of building a new house in the 21st century, we established sustainability and performance goals for the house using climate, building envelope, mechanical systems, and energy harvesting, and essentially work with our clients to get to here. The property is accessed through that long driveway, as I showed you, through a densely wooded site, and you get to a pea gravel parking area, walk on a stone path through an opening in the historic stone fence that was part of the definition of the farming fields. You get a kind of subtle threshold between the woods and the open field and landscape. All of the program, it's not a huge house, 4 bedrooms, a library, big living room, are on one floor in 2 volumes. This is a very low budget project. And the idea of the dark horizontal massing of the house is that it disappears somewhat into the shadows of the tree line. And from these windows, you can see mountains in the distance. Polished concrete floors reflect the abundant natural light. Pale wood paneling on the inside does the same, gives a little bit of warmth and texture. And as I mentioned, the land had long been farmed and then pastured, so we didn't cut down any trees when we built this house. But when we came to the woods on the side, we decided that it'd be worth contrasting views into the woods with the meadow and the distant views beyond. So the building has a high-performance enclosure, deep overhangs to the south, so take advantage of the sun in the wintertime, reduce the negative effects of the sun in the summertime, and it has an all-electric geothermal heating and cooling system. And we added solar panels last year, so it is now fully net zero. So the next project I'm going to show you, you're going to think this is a mad race to see all 425 projects we've done. I promise we will stop well before then. This is a conversion of an old New York City public school into home for a number of arts organizations, including an AIDS clinic that supports artists, the well-known theater group Mabu Minds, Movement Research, which is a dance organization, Painting Space 122, which is an artist residency program, and Performance Space New York. And the building was originally built as PS 122 in New York's East Village. So in the late 19th and early 20th century, New York City built hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, that's no exaggeration, of new public schools. And I don't know, this was either the blessing of a lifetime or the most boring job ever for one architect, this guy, C.B.J. Snyder, much less famous than Albert Kahn or H.H. Richardson, but maybe just as important in New York. He was the superintendent of school buildings in New York from 1891 to 1923. And he built over 400 public schools himself. So if you go to New York and you find yourself in your neighborhood and you wonder why all the old public schools look exactly the same, it's because they were all designed by one guy. So here is PS 122 when it was still used as a school and when the elevated trains still ran on First Avenue. The building was later abandoned by the Department of Education and reoccupied by arts groups, kind of guerrilla style. They broke into the building and just started using it. The elaborate cornice had been removed. The heating system barely worked. And by the 1980s, many artists and arts groups were squatting all over the building. You see Keith Haring here in his studio in PS 122. And in the early 2000s, the city issued an RFP for the renovation of the building. It was essentially a code upgrade. So we applied for the job. And once we were there, we actually understood that the concerns of the various art groups, they were nervous. I mean, they liked the idea that the city might turn the heat on, but they were concerned about being kicked out, and they were even more concerned that the building was not going to feel the same if somebody messed with it. So we did that code upgrade, and we did actually quite a bit more. So we added this luminous circulation core to the side of the building. There was a tiny empty lot there owned by the city. Made it possible to move through the building. You could explore it. You could enter on grade. You could enter in a wheelchair. There were real bathrooms. There was a code-compliant fire stair. And it is clad in a perforated stainless steel. The idea is that it shimmers in the daylight with varying levels of transparency, and it does not look anything at all like the 125-year-old brick building that it is now a part of. You can see that addition here. There was a little inset in the building. This was the old entrance and the old fire stairs. So we entered at grade in this little park. And, oops, I apologize. As you go up in the building, we were able to add a room on each floor that could be shared by the various arts groups in the building. This is the new lobby. It's the first lobby the building ever had. One of the things we tried to do in this renovation was to relocate found parts of the buildings wherever we could, like this old stained glass window, which was upstairs in what had been a quasi-auditorium-like space. It actually reads, "Every waking hour we weave, whether we will or no, every trivial act or word into the warp must go." Whatever. It was written by an English poet named Caroline Bowles in 1843. And I think the point to the students was that our lives are built through small, constant choices we make as opposed to the ones that seem so big and important. But the other thing we did in the lobby was to decide to show the new steel structure that was necessary to reinforce the old building. But elsewhere, we kept all of it simple, so it could be about the artists and about their work and really not about the architecture. Some of the former classrooms are painting studios for the artist residency program that I mentioned. This is the theater that Mabu Mines uses. And it was during the design process, they all said, don't make it nice, don't make it nice. And I think in that was a kind of don't erase history. It is what makes this building special. And I think they were referring both to the history of the building as a school and then their own history of taking it over as abandoned property and doing something productive and meaningful with it. And because you think I only have one idea, here's the old column in this room that we saved, but this one we painted black. We cleaned and repainted everything old and contrasted it with the new. As I've said before, I don't believe you should make fake old or imitate the past. And what you see here is in the extension of the stairs up to the new roof level. Our new railing is nothing like the old railing of the original public school. What we did to create a big enough theater was to not put it any place low in the building, but to raise the roof and put it at the top of the building. So you see it here, you see practice theater space, you see again that added room, and then you go up the new stairs one more time and you get another theater space and access to a roof terrace. But one of the nice things that happens when the large groups of people go up the stairs or up the elevator is that they pass the artists in the studios, they pass the practice spaces, they pass the dance workshop, and all of the arts feel integrated. And what we found is that the groups, since the renovation, have been working together vastly more happily than they did when they were fighting over every square inch in the building. And you see that new theater space here on the top floor. This is a skateboarding troupe of dancers called Bruges, and they are rehearsing for a performance here. So we're going to go back out to the eastern end of Long Island to a house built in 1884. Actually wasn't a house originally. It was built as a rooming house. The wealthy moved out east to what had been farmland starting when the Long Island Railroad started going out there. Those who could not afford grand cottages stayed in rooming houses that were cooled by the ocean breezes. And what I want you to see in this historic postcard is that dormer. That's important. This is the dirt roads of East Hampton. Today, Steven Spielberg lives somewhere down here. And what's interesting about this, it had 8 rooms as well as maids' rooms on the top floor, so you would bring your lady maid with you. The largest room in the house was the dining room, so everybody could eat together. And rooms plus meals were $2 a day. And that was a significant sum in the 1880s, and the Hamptons have only gotten more expensive. But when we took the job over, no dormer. What you see here is a map of the oddly shaped property. It had been an enormous farm, and it kept getting sold off over the years. And you get a sense, here's the Atlantic Ocean. This is Georgica Pond, if any of you know the Hamptons. And this is Appoquog Road that takes you to one of the town beaches. So there's the house right up by the road. Wait, let me go back for one sec, because what I do want to say is that the boarding house closed in 1918, and then a family bought the house. They owned it from 1919 until 2022, so for more than 100 years owned by the same family, and they did nothing. When the roof started to leak, they took the dormer off. There was no heating in this building, no air conditioning in this building. The kitchen dated from the 1920s, which was rather charming and hopeless at the same time. And they were very happy living that way. 3 generations of the family stayed in the house in that condition. Our client purchased it in 2022, and this was the condition inside the top floor, where the maids had slept. Some of the old beds remained. When I first walked through the house, there were copies of the New Yorker from 1936 on the nightstands. It was really kind of frozen in time. Now, happily, our client wanted to save the house, which was really great because it was not protected by any regulation at all. And in the Hamptons, zoning is such that based on the size of the lot, somebody could have built a Versailles, a ghastly copy of Versailles on this piece of property. So she wanted to save it, great, but she wanted to move it back from the street because it was right on the street. So what you see here is the process of moving it back. The building had no foundation. It had been built, as many of the 1880s houses in the Hamptons were, on locust poles that have been driven into the sand. So we built a new foundation. We tore off the 1920s kitchen and built a new addition, and then we rolled it back. I don't have a film, but you'll get the idea. Ba-boom, ba-boom, crash. Happily, they meshed very nicely, and the village of East Hampton was happy because, of course, in its new position, it was compliant with contemporary setbacks. And here you see it today. It now looks like this because based on the old postcards, they let us put the dormer back on, and that room has a spectacular view of the Atlantic Ocean. Landscape was done by Edwina von Gaal. She's noted for her work that uses indigenous plants and no pesticides. You get a sense of that here. You see, the only plan worth looking at is this is the original house with the giant dining room, the 2 parlors. We snuck in an elevator, saved the original porch, and then added all that in the back. This is the West Parlor, renovated and restored with its original fireplace. The leaded glass doors had been doors to china cabinets in the dining room, so we reused them here to make doors between the parlor and the dining room. This is that old dining room. The chandelier is not original. And as I said, we did the interiors on this project as well, commissioned the chandelier. The fireplace is original. The door on the right takes you into the kitchen, and the door on the left takes you out to the screen porch, which looks like this, so a delightful place to have a summer dinner. The owner's a superb cook and loves to entertain. This is the new kitchen. It is expansive, plenty of places to sit and eat and cook. It opens into an area of outdoor seating, a barbecue area, and this is the new family room. To the north of the kitchen, the vertical boards tie it to the interior of the old house, and you can see the large meadow beyond it. The owner has I've been known to be a minimalist. This is not a good example. The owner has a very festive spirit. This was an original sink, which we restored and had replated. And what you see here is the original stair on the left as we found it, and on the right as its new condition. Very, very low non-code compliant railing. And what you see here is what you see from the front door, and you can look all the way through the old house, the new addition, and out to the meadow beyond. The second floor has 6 bedrooms, 4 in the original house and 2 in the addition. The third floor has 4 more bedrooms, and the top floor is the owner's suite with the bedroom in that replaced dormer, and her sitting area in that, what was that yellow room I showed you a little earlier in this project. And this is what the house looks like from the back. I'm going to show you one more project. This is in the Dixwell neighborhood of New Haven, Connecticut. The project was imagined initially by this guy, Titus Kaffar, a painter who received his MFA from Yale. He and I didn't meet at Yale, but the 21C Museum Hotel folks, the reused car factory, and many other projects throughout the Midwest collected his work, and that's how we became friends. We share values, we share collectors and clients, and he had a vision for a serious artist residency program in New Haven. He'd been featured in the New York Times. He won a MacArthur Genius Award, and the article in the Times referred to the project that I'm about to show you, his place called Next Haven. The project started with this, a former lab supply manufacturing plant. This building essentially made test tubes for the chemistry department at Yale, and further to the right in this photograph, a place where they made ice cream. So we redesigned, reconnected, and expanded these abandoned buildings of no particular architectural merit, but a piece of this community. So we demolished the parts that were not worth saving. We renovated the parts with spaces that one could celebrate, and we added what was missing, which was a gallery in the center and a residence for artists at the back. You can kind of see this here in the plan. This was the test tube factory. The big room was there. It was where they made the test tubes. We changed the rooms along the side. This was the ice cream factory. We did take out the 14-inch thick cork walls because it yielded a lot more floor area. We added this piece in the middle, and we added this tall-ish building at the back. The connector to Next Haven is the center. It's where you entrance, and it is intentionally open. There are no pulled-down gates. There's no guard. The idea is that the community feels welcome here. And as you saw in the plan, directly behind the entrance is the gallery. This is what you see as you walk in. When you get in, you see the gallery space, which is open to the public. That big room that you saw in the plan is off to the left, and the artists who are in residence go up the ramp to the right. This is the inside of that gallery space, which is new. It shows the work of the artists in residence as well as invited artists. You see another view of it here. It is skylit. and you get a sense of how these two new pieces and the two old buildings fit together. The addition houses 3 stories of studios and live-work studio spaces. We clad it in a basket weave pattern of the least expensive brick we could buy, and the glazing at the base brings daylight into 2 floors of studio spaces. On the inside of the addition, there's an elevator and stairs, including down to the lower level where there's workspaces, a shop, and a small theater. This is the aula, the big room, a large gathering space in the old test tube faculty. These are high school students in a paid apprenticeship program, so they understand that art actually is a possible career. Next Haven does other things here, like distribute food at Thanksgiving, just do vaccines and testing during COVID. The community is meant to feel welcome. And we celebrated the surfaces as we found them, as they speak to the many, many years of use. It is part of the character of this place. And throughout the building, we didn't hide or disguise any of the systems necessary to make it work for its new purpose or to meet contemporary codes. And everywhere we could, we showed off what we found. And what you can see here are the painted beams in the tiny part of the ice cream factory where you could go in and buy an ice cream cone. This is one of the artist studios now. One of the great things about Next Haven is the artists don't just get support for their work, but actually get taught what it means to be an artist, about intellectual property, about negotiating with galleries, about working with collectors. I believe the 8th cohort is in residence now. If you come to New Haven, let me know. I would love to take you on a tour. Because I like to think that we at TenBerke, me also as an educator, are kind of bound by the promise that architecture should do everything it can to build dignity and decency, and that the truest measure of good design is the good that it does in the world. I don't think architecture is an end in itself. I think it's a tool that helps us turn what we have into what we need. I hope that our buildings prompt some agency, connect meaningfully to time and place, and connect people to one another. So it means that the work is not idealistic, but also effective, finding that path between the world as it is, which is not so great right now, and the world as it might be. I like to think of the work as being authentic and complex and textured and impactful. You get excited first time, but it's nuanced over time. Work's sometimes been described as minimalist, understated, restrained, calm. That all sounds good to me. But I also believe in work that is beautiful and memorable and unexpected. Everything we do is collaborative, and I think it comes from the trust we have in the studio, in one another, and the trust we have with those with whom we work, including our clients. I really do mean this. The truest meaning of good design is the good that it does in the world. And we try to do everything based on that ethic. We're in it for the long haul, because forever is a whole lot of nows in a row. So thank you very much. There was a nice compliment at the beginning, I won't repeat, and then a question about women in the profession and in the academy. Architecture schools in the United States today are 50% female. That is an enormous change from the million years ago when I was in school, when it was around 15%. But the profession still lags behind. I've heard women jokingly say that's because women are smart and they get out of architecture. But I think there are many things about the way we practice that make it hard if you want to have a family or spend time with your children or be the caregiver for the people older than you and the people younger than you. You know, balancing giving care and being a practitioner is pretty hard. That said, the profession is changing. I mean, I think everybody, somewhere tonight there'll be a question about AI. We're all terrified about AI, but, or not, that perhaps there is some benefits there in how we can change what a workload for an architect looks like. I'm not really answering your question. I think you'll succeed in architecture, whatever gender you might be, if you are driven by passion and care and you remember that life has three important things in it. You know, there's work, love, play, my husband always says. You need the love part for sure to do anything in this world. You need the play part to keep your mind sane and healthy and your body healthy. And then you need work that is meaningful. And if you find the right balance for those three things, no matter what your gender is, you can do anything. Anybody else? Yeah. You know, a lot of the adaptive reuse projects we did, particularly in the Midwest for the 21C museum hotels, were able to be financed through historic tax credits. And when you do those, you don't decide what you get to keep. The state historic people tell you what you have to keep if it's in the era of significance of the building. So we would work with them to keep what was important. But in the other places where there's no authority telling us what to do, I would say there are those components that speak to you intellectually. You know, these tiles were made in upstate New York, or this wood came from this nearby forest, and you feel that it's part of the story of the building, and you have to keep it. And then there are the parts that just speak to your gut. Like when we saw the trusses in the Albee barn, it's like, look at those things, right? Farmers built these things. They're spectacular. We have to show those off. There were no rules and there was no science. It was just, you know, if you're an architect, you have a set of eyes and you want them to communicate with your brain, but also with your heart, I think. Anybody else? Okay then.